Hello, this is Matt Bergman, and you are listening to the Punk Rock Libertarians podcast, episode 108. I'm here tonight with Jared Schneiderman.
What's up, guys?
And Ethan Montgomery.
What's up?
Big Eth in the house.
Yeah, dude. Ethan, man.
And Sukasa.
Hell yeah, dude. It's great to have you back, dog.
Thanks for having me.
Fuck yeah, man. Thanks for coming on, dude. So, before the podcast, we were like just talking about shit that happened this week and shit. And Ethan had us watch this.
Shit.
And Ethan had us watch this video from, what is this, from like Bill Nye's television show?
So, so he's got a new show. I really didn't know very little about it. Then he has some new show on Netflix. I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix, like Netflix produced.
Yeah.
And it's the dumbest, cringiest, most blatantly propaganda. Like, there's no even thin veil about it. It's the most ridiculous propaganda. And of course it's popular with all the lefties who are, around our age, who of course watched Bill Nye when they were little and be like, oh, this Bill Nye, isn't this the most wonderful thing ever? I guess you had some episode on gender, and it had nothing to do with any science. It was all just crazy leftist gender propaganda. And there was a song starring the girl who I believe she was from the overly attached ex-girlfriend or overly attached girlfriend. Singing a song very badly.
Very badly.
Yeah, very badly. With the most ridiculous, non-scientific... It was basically just promoting the most ridiculous nonsense sexual degeneracy. Like, at some point, she's talking about giving a stranger a handy and just do whatever you feel like. I mean, it was pretty nonsensical. And of course, it's been... criticized roundly and just mocked and laughed at is like the cringiest thing of all time, and it is pretty fucking cringe on many levels, really.
Yeah,
it's like layers upon layers of cringe.
Yeah, if you hadn't seen it, just YouTube Bill Nye Sex Junk.
Which is already just a cringy ass title to begin with.
Yeah, it's funny because like this lady was like horrible. It's like the music's just bad music all out.
Yeah, it's just every level of
like,
it is
remember when people thought
bad.
it was like cool and clever and funny to do like hip hop skits where it's like I'm just like a dorky white person and I'm gonna do hip hop. Like that's the first layer of like shittiness, of cringiness.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're just dropping. I mean, I guess because on Netflix they can say whatever they want, so they're dropping all sorts of talk about like vaginas and like fleshlights and butt stuff, and it's like
hard and
it's like now they're kind of going for a shock value thing, but it's like it's fucking Bill Nye, dude. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, again, this is supposed to be all about like bringing science back to the mainstream.
Yeah.
This is all about pop sci. That's what Bill Nye always was.
Yeah,
and they've always been. It's always been like a darling thing of the left is the pop sci because it's a perfect way for them to just sort of weasel their little leftist agendas in there.
Yeah, but I don't know that you can make that claim about.
I know you laugh at it, but
I don't know you can make that claim
that.
about the original one though. I mean, I haven't gone back and watched it recently, but as I recall...
Well, I mean, certainly nowhere to this degree. I mean, obviously... And it's funny, people actually went back and dug up the original Bill Nye from... It has to be, like, I guess 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Plus that it was airing. And so somebody went and dug it up where he actually, in the original show, has an episode talking about gender or something. And he says, like, definitively,
chromosomes determine your gender.
Chromosomes determine your gender. And you're either a boy or a girl. So, of course, it's hilarious that he's saying the exact opposite thing 20 years later.
Totally, dude.
But yeah, I mean, but that's the thing is,
Dude,
whether or not,
how is scientism
whether or not you
gonna
agree with me
survive?
that it was there before or not, like this is so blatantly just political propaganda. Like I don't see how anybody can't see it and laugh at it. And that's one of those other levels is that like, wait, you actually believe, like expect us to believe that this is anything other than what it is, which is again just this ridiculous like propaganda that has nothing to do with science.
Yeah.
Whatsoever.
Yeah, and then, so there was that thing, and then apparently there was another piece about, they got into some, I think it was like just like a panel or discussion or something, and Bill Nye basically said, because excess population is contributing to global warming, Jesus, dude, because excess population, or just a large population is contributing to global warming, we ought to ban having kids, or it was like ban having multiple children, like what China did
Yeah,
and
so
then
he's literally talking about like the China
the one child policy,
yeah, one child policy,
which like backfired like
well,
completely.
and again, I mean, and this is the thing we as ANCAPs or libertarians, whatever, understand is ultimately at the end of the day, the question is, and how are you going to enforce it? And of course, the answer is, as we know, is when the state's involved, it's violence.
Yeah.
And so, again, to put this in the context of like talking about procreating, childbirth, and like, but we need to introduce violence into this situation. It's just particularly just.
And it's just with the callousness that it's said and like the complete not having thought it out at all. Like it's one thing if, all right, global climate change argument aside, if we accept that it is possible that a growing population contributes to climate change, even so, there are other ways to sort of solve that problem without having the state intervene. There's encouraging people to adopt, which I would strongly advocate that.
Well, as we all know, pretty much all the whites in white countries are reproducing at below replacement rate. Or around or below replacement rate. This is true, man. You can laugh, but this is completely fucking true. And believe me, I'm going to tie this in. So, again, this notion of overpopulation, it's like, well, don't be looking at the Western countries because we're the ones that are, if anything, our populations are on the decline.
Yeah,
Of course, it's the third world that's exploding.
Right.
Interesting little way to tie this all together is, again, all the leftists say we have to bring in all these third worlders into Western countries, the refugee, quote unquote, populations and everything. Well, we know de facto that when they come to the Western countries, they're consuming resources at a rate of everybody else in the Western world. And so that's exactly what he's talking about, is populations using up energy and resources. Well, that's exactly what this policy is when you're taking third worlders and putting them in the Western world. Now you have, and we're talking about millions and millions of people. There's been like 2 million at least, I think, in Germany alone, which is not a very big country. So we're talking about tens of millions of people. They're suddenly now using resources, i.e. energy, etc., at like literally like 5 to 10 times of the rate that they were in, the middle, where they were in the Middle East. So, here they are, they're talking about population is a problem for energy consumption, etc. And here's a policy where it's de facto increasing the energy amount used by, these populations that are coming in. Whereas, and again, there are alternatives, i.e. resettling them elsewhere in the Middle East, which has been going on, in the quote unquote peaceful Middle Eastern countries like Jordan, Turkey, etc. That are at least relatively peaceful and certainly not warranting any sort of refugee status. And again, while I'm on that topic, fun little fact, people have crunched the numbers, and it basically costs 10 times as much to resettle a quote-unquote refugee in the U.S., at least this is talking about the U.S., maybe the numbers are slightly different for Europe, than it does to resettle them in, say, Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, or whatever.
Right.
So if you have a limited amount of resources to resettle these people, you're deliberately helping only 1/10 of the amount of people you could be helping by saying we need to take them to the U.S. as opposed to saying why don't we just put them in some sort of resettlement camp in Saudi Arabia, which is right next door where everybody is already just like them,
there's also a culture shock.
Yeah, on both sides. There are huge amounts of problems, not just for the native populations, but it's not good for the refugees either. They don't speak the language. They don't know how the culture works. They don't know how society works. The way they interact between men and women, I'm not sitting here passing judgment. I do have my own opinions, but that aside, they're not really compatible with the way, male and female relationships work in the West, and so they're getting into all sorts of criminal mischief, which is not good for either their Western victims or for them that are getting involved in the law enforcement system. And and again, that's all a relatively charitable analysis, I think. Of the problems that,
and that's not to
that
say
we're looking at. And there are, and again, and the worst thing about it is that there are alternatives. There are other places that these people can be resettled that are elsewhere in the Middle East or in other Muslim cultures where they do better, we do better. It costs less money. There's less resources used for all the greenies. Which, of course, the greenies, they don't actually care about this shit. It's just a cudgel for their political.
So, like a greenie, is that like a cross between like a green and a weenie?
I mean, I just mean
What
the
is a green?
environmentalists. I've always liked
Like
the
a-
term.
like a
I've
golfing green?
always liked the term watermelon. Green on the outside, red on the inside, like communist. You know, and that's what it is. It's all just a front for communism. But I know you're just going to laugh at me as the
Well, I mean,
local
I don't know
whack job.
that.
But that is what it is, and that's what we're seeing. Again, they're talking about like,
Well, I don't know that you can say
population is a
every-
problem with
yeah.
environment, and blah blah blah.
Well-
and that's why white people need to stop reproducing, and yet at the same time we need to bring
Yeah, the people that
millions
say
of
that
people
kind
from
of
the
shit,
third
yeah.
world into your countries where they're going to be using massively more resources, cost a lot of money, be burning 10 times the amount of the energy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know
None
that
of
it's
it
fair
makes
to say
sense.
everybody that's concerned with the environment is therefore a lefty communist.
Well, no, of course not. Of course not. I'm speaking in generalities.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
certainly
you're talking about-
the political environmentalist movement.
Yeah.
Has absolutely been. You know, that's what it's been about.
Yeah, exactly. What was I going to say? Well, yeah, so going back to sort of like the refugee thing, when you talk about how like you have cultures clashing, I mean, part of what makes the United States awesome is that we do have a lot of different cultures that have sort of contributed a lot of different things, but there is a difference between
Well, let me-
just hold on, let me finish. There's a difference between like forcefully resettling a population as opposed to having like natural immigration where they're like, oh, I recognize that the United States, you know, is a land of fucking milk and honey. Oh wait, no, that was Israel. Is a land of like gold-plated streets and shit, and they come over and they like try to have a better life, and they, you know, they learn that they have to sort of assimilate to a certain degree, but then they can also, you know, have their Italian bakeries and they can have their
Well, and that's
you
the
know,
key is the assimilation.
right. It's recognizing that you are coming to there is a certain baseline culture that we have here, you know, which
Yes,
ideally respects individual property rights, you know, all the stuff that we stand for. However, there's obviously a growing movement of people that don't believe that anymore.
Well, exactly, and they're, i.e., the communists, and,
Right.
and that's the thing. Is there used to be a national identity, and again, I'm not saying this to try to appeal to a sense of nationalism, but the fact is that it used to actually mean something to be an American. The Americans had an actual definable, unique culture, identity, etc., and a lot of that was influenced by whiteness, Europeanness, etc. And
I mean, I would say
and-
it's more influenced just by what I just said, with, you know, just respect for individual rights.
Well, yeah,
I mean, 'cause
absolutely,
that's why this-
absolutely, there's that civic nationalism, but at the same time, there is absolutely, I think, to some extent, like you're talking about, it's the melting pot sort of
Well, I
argument.
don't even like the melting pot idea because
Well, neither do I, but I think it is fair to recognize that there was a process of, you know, different ways of different European immigrants coming here, and the process and the story of them then assimilating to American culture and bringing some stuff with them and contributing them to American culture. But again, part of that story is them ultimately assimilating into American culture, whether we're talking about German immigrants or Irish immigrants or Italian immigrants, which largely in the past sort of came in waves. You know, both ethnically as well as just, you know, immigration overall. It had always been very tightly controlled. But that all changed in, you know, the argument goes that it all changed in the 1960s when they changed the immigration policy to basically a free-for-all for anybody and everybody with a preference for the third world. And so that's what we've had ever since the 60s. And so it's been a very different dynamic where we haven't had the same levels of both inherent cultural American identity for immigrants to assimilate into, nor have the immigrants that have been coming here really had much interest in assimilating into any sort of unique identity. And maybe we can't blame them because we don't really have much of a unique identity that, you know, they can assimilate into anymore. That I think we used to have more, so it used to mean something a little more to be an American culturally, and you know, as far as identity. You know, and I think, you know, the Marxists over the last century have done a good job of completely obliterating that. You know, if you think of, you know, what did it mean to be a person in 1950s America, you can picture what that kind of person or what that kind of culture was like.
yeah,
But now today, it's all so blurred. What does it really mean to be American? There is no specific cultural identity, you know, that you can associate with America anymore. And I think that's problematic.
I don't know, man. Like, what you're kind of saying, it's more about like the individual identity.
well, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
So
is that
I mean,
don't know-
I think that's better than like a national identity, dude. I think it's breaking things up.
I'm not making any normative argument here about like what we should be doing. I'm just saying that's how it's been and
no,
how it
it's
seems
like,
to be
dude,
now.
I thought you were about to say like we're gonna make America great again and shit.
Well, hopefully we will, but I mean, time will tell. No, I mean, I maybe I'm crazy. I think what I'm saying makes sense.
No, I mean it kind of could. I was just throwing something else back at you. Like I'm saying, maybe it's cooler to have like a billion identities or than just a national identity.
I mean, I don't think that, I mean, people always say diversity is a strength, but I mean, that's, people have tried to look at it a bunch of different ways, and demonstrably there's no evidence for that. There's a lot of evidence that shows that diversity in a lot of ways is the opposite of a strength, that it's a weakness, that all sorts of social cohesion and stuff falls down. And again, I'm not making a normative argument here saying this is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should just be accepting that diversity is a strength on blind faith. I think that, whether or not we agree with, a constitutional Republican form of government or, whatever, but we as a society, we have no choice, but we're going to be around each other. We're going to be interacting with one another to some degree, whether we like it or not. And I think it works best when everybody has a very clear understanding of how that works and how that goes down and how you conduct yourself, etc. It's just a simple fact of life. It's just the physics and the reality of it is that people have to work together, and you have to have some ground rules on how people, how people.
And here's the thing: like the problem is, you could have a society where like there are stark differences in cultures, like that have completely different values, and they just separate themselves. But the problem, which I think you're kind of hinting at a little bit, is that there's sort of this forced integration that goes on. When you have like discrimination laws where it's like you have to hire certain people, or affirmative action or things like that just sort of
and the immigration policy since the 60s too. Also,
but see, I'm just thinking of it in more terms of like Ancapistan, where I don't think we'd have. I mean, obviously we wouldn't have.
Sure, but fundamentally, yes, it does come down to the fact that it's not voluntary. Absolutely,
right. So what I'm saying, exactly. So what I'm saying is like. I mean, I think we could have a world where, like, you did have, like, the Muslim culture where maybe they're not as respectful about their women, but, if they're doing that, although, I mean, if they're violating the NAP, I mean, theoretically, you could go and interfere and protect those people if you wanted to, technically speaking.
Yeah, hypothetically, theoretically, sure.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is, like, when you have sort of the forced integration thing where you're like, no, you have to play with this guy, like, you have to get along with this guy. If you don't, either it's just shaming, like you're a racist, you're this, you're a bigot, whatever, or if it's just like, oh, we're going to fine your business X amount of dollars because you didn't hire enough black people
or throw you in jail or whatever. Yeah,
like that is, I think, where a lot of the problem comes from.
And of course, in Europe, they have hate speech laws where you can't even speak out about it.
Yeah,
it's not even just a matter of like you didn't hire enough black people. It's that you vocally said that you shouldn't have to hire black people. It's like 1984 shit. I mean, that's where it's all heading. But that's neither here nor there. Like, it does ultimately comes down to voluntary association. And if we had voluntary association, then people would be enforcing rules like I have cultural norms that if you don't follow them, I'm not engaging with you, and I don't want you on my property. I don't want you in my town because everybody else in town is a property owner, and we all live here because we all agree on these cultural norms. So yes, like the Hoppian Christian covenant or whatever, like yes, people are going to get together with like-minded people and they're going to enforce their property rights and exclude people based on things that might seem arbitrary and capricious, but so what? That's their right, to exclude whoever they want, and that would go a long way to keep, to keeping people in check, and so many other things. But so and that's what the whole border things come down to is like, oh well, if there wasn't a welfare state, you wouldn't care about borders. It's like but we do have a welfare state, and so as long like I have no capacity to end the state tomorrow or any time in my lifetime. Believe me, I'm doing things, I'm trying, but I have no false notions that this is going to be happening tomorrow. So as long as there's a welfare state, I want those fucking borders controlled, because there's all those borders would be controlled by somebody. Right now they're controlled by the state. So as long as they're controlled by the state ought to be at least doing what people want to be done with those borders anyway. And if those people want to keep out people that have a different culture, a different identity or whatever, or just different economic interests, whatever. That's totally their priority. I mean, you could have an isolated island, economic island in Ancapistan that has no trade with the outside world because they don't the outside world or something. And of course, that's their prerogative. That's their right. We would argue that, of course, they're being economically stupid and losing out by not trading, but that's their prerogative.
Shouldn't it only be up to border states if we're talking about like property rights? And it's kind of like their state. It's like their property.
I mean, if you want to get into the nuances, sure. But then, of course, every other state has the right to enforce their borders, in turn as well, of course.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like a border wall should be up to the border states, kind of, like more so than say the federal government.
Well, the argument would go that the wall benefits everybody. Maybe disproportionately more so the people on the border states. Have more illegal immigrant populations just due to proximity, but overall the argument would be that the whole country benefits, and thus the federal government should be doing it. Which, I mean, again, I'm losing all my ANCAP cred here, but like, if we're going to assume that a government exists, then that's not the most illegitimate thing of all things for the federal government to be doing, if we are to assume that there is such a thing as a federal government that asserts control.
Yeah, but see, a criticism that I saw recently that I agree with, although it's hard to quantify, is just the fact that, yeah, you had it like synced up wrong, but it's fine. Just let it go. The problem that or the criticism that I saw was that it seems as though the anti-border crowd, and I'm not necessarily talking about you, but in general, seem to attack or support borders with more fervor than they attack the welfare state. Now, I can't quantify that, but that is sort of the what I've been getting, what I've been hearing. Like, you didn't have this huge movement to end the welfare state. All of a sudden, you just have like build a wall, build a wall, build a wall.
No, I think you're right, because it's infinitely more realistic of happening.
Maybe, I don't know. I still think the wall just sounds completely ridiculous.
Well,
I mean, you're talking about the amount of money that's going to go into it, the money for maintenance, the people that you got to hire, and
compared to all the other things the federal government does, it's really not like.
But the thing is, the federal government's going to keep doing all that other shit. So it's like all you're going to just do is add to the debt, add to the deficit.
But Mexico's going to pay for it.
They're not going to fucking pay for shit.
Well, they're renegotiating NAFTA.
I mean, even the tax.
They're renegotiating NAFTA.
Trump just came out saying that he supported NAFTA.
I said that as a joke, but
okay.
Well, he's saying whatever he has to say to get them to the negotiating table. No, I mean, I was just kidding. But no, I think it is. I mean, it's maybe they're both unrealistic, but ending the welfare state's a lot more unrealistic than building the wall.
Yeah, I mean, finding a unicorn is more realistic than finding a three-headed unicorn.
Well, I mean,
I don't know, man. I'm very skeptical. I will be.
Animals
I would be willing to make a bet that the wall will not get built.
I'll bet you animals spontaneously grow horns a lot more than they do 2 extra heads.
Well, yeah, some animals do have horns, like a rhino.
I don't know. I mean, we're all just guessing, so who knows? But
I get the argument.
But that's I think that's the reason why, which was the question. So I think the people perceive it as infinitely more realistic. Sure. I think it is still realistic. I mean, we'll see. I mean, if there's anybody that could or would, it's Trump. He made an awful big deal of it.
Yeah, but it seems like everything he's been doing is pretty much not been happening. Anything that he's been trying has been thwarted.
He's followed. He's done a hell of a lot with executive orders.
Like what though? So yeah, let's move on to that. Let's move on to Trump's 100 days. We got to get Big E's synopsis of this.
Synopsis,
because we've been shitting on Trump nonstop since he's been gone. So
I mean, he hasn't really accomplished much legislatively. I mean, obviously there was the whole healthcare thing. My guess, I didn't follow it that closely. It seemed like the bill in question was a pretty big turd.
Yes.
So,
but he did support it.
So, well, that's what he says.
I mean, what? Well, I don't have anything else to go on.
No, that's fair. I think at the end of the day, like if it was going to be a turd, maybe we'd be better off, just waiting and doing it right. And if that's ultimately what happens, is that they actually do repeal and replace it with something that's reasonably good, then I'm all for it.
Sure. Yeah.
most of what he's done has just been an executive order, and they've tried to hold him up as much as they can there. Although there's not much they can do.
I don't know. I just
and in
think
terms of undoing Obama did so much by executive order. Trump is able to undo a whole lot by executive order, and it includes stuff with the EPA, the DOE. He just turned over. It was something like 200. I'm pretty sure I had these numbers right. At least just like the proportion is roughly correct. It's something like 250 million acres of federal lands he turned back over to the respective states. I think it's primarily like Utah, Nevada. It's all out west. Mm-hmm. Maybe there were some other spots. I'm not sure. But that's the equivalent of like 1.25 Texas is. Like Texas is like 80 million acres or something. And he turned over more than that from the federal government. So I mean,
that's cool.
I'll wait to see.
I like that.
I'm sure some left libertarian somewhere will find a way to have a problem with that, and it'll be amusing to see why. I saw headlines about something about him putting some big stake in the heart of Common Core via Betsy DeVos. I haven't followed into that, so I can't say anything more about that specifically. Excuse me. As far as like energy regulations, he's rolled back a whole bunch of stuff. He told the IRS to not enforce the Obamacare mandate, i.e. the penalty. I know I'm going to miss so many, so I'm not going to try to remember all of them. I do know he unveiled his tax plan pretty recently, or at least a lot more details than he had in the past. And what I'm seeing so far looks really good. It's basically what conservatives have been talking about all along, which is radically simplifying the tax code. I think like it's basically like no deductions whatsoever other than mortgage interest and what was the other one? Charitable donations.
Yeah, I saw Jeffrey Tucker posted a pretty glowing article about the tax plan. He's been a pretty vocal critic of Trump, so I mean, if he's
kudos to Tucker. I don't have a whole lot of respect for him, but maybe it's just broken clock being right twice a day. Maybe he's finally saw the writing on the wall. Being a left libertarian is a losing cause. I mean, he seems to follow wherever.
Well, I think he's consistent on economic things.
Do you think Tucker's a left libertarian?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
He's a very left libertarian. I don't want to get stuck on
I just think he's not right, dude. Dude.
We're talking about tax plan.
Dude, I think you're just kind of stuck in this like political paradigm, dude.
You do talk left-right.
Left-right is an extremely important paradigm. I encourage you to read RK selection theory and other human biodiversity-related subjects that will sort of shed some light on there being there's really something to the left-right spectrum.
But do we need to have it? Like, is it something that we need to like reinforce?
Well, not in Ancapistan. Yeah, but we're not in
dude,
Ancapistan.
I'm more of a fan of the Nolan chart, dude. It seems like a little more friendly, and left-right just seems kind of like one or the other, dude. And it's like you're drawing the lines, and then you're gonna fucking sword fight with your wiener.
Now you're just projecting.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the Nolan chart, at least for me, like when I define myself, I don't think of myself as left or right. I think of myself as just pro-freedom. And I agree with the left on some things, and I agree with the right on some things. And I mean, if you wanted to chart me and you like added up all my different issues and where I stand on them, I don't know where I would land. Maybe I would be a little bit to the right if you compared it with like what Republicans say or what Democrats say.
But I mean, like the whole paradigm has been switched from what it was back in the day.
Well, that too.
So
but I mean, if you just talk about like the strict definitions of right, maybe not like Republican, Democrat, but just like.
Yeah,
but there's so much semantics.
I do not mean Republican and Democrat.
Well, it means different things to different people, and I think it's kind of more liberating to break ourselves free of this. There's only two ways to think, kind of mentality that goes along with, of course, continually using those words and hammering them into the ground.
Of course, there's a huge amount of nuance to it. I mean, and so here's I mean, there's a whole lot of nuance that the Nolan chart doesn't include either. Like, of
course not.
What do I believe in terms of Ancapistan, and what do I believe in terms of the current conditions? I mean, those are two very different questions and two very different answers, at least for me, because I think you have to accept that we're never going to just like flip the switch to Ancapistan. We're never going to like suddenly convince 51% of people to vote for Ancapistan.
But I mean, like is a wall the best way to get us to Ancapistan?
Maybe not.
No,
but the point is that
not.
there is a process where you're going to have to make some
maybe, but then you get into the whole
totally black and white.
Then you're getting into the whole ends justifies the means things, which is exactly what the left, the Antifa people, which is what they promote. So it's like. I would rather just stick to the principle and just do everything we can to move. I mean, I'm not saying let's not use the political system. I'm not like a complete agorist like Vibes is, but what was I saying? Yeah, I mean, I just don't know that adding more laws and just creating more friction and creating more rules aside from, you know, the non-aggression principle, I just don't know that that's the way to go. I mean, you could almost make a pragmatic for any action.
You're right. I mean,
it's a slippery slope.
And yes, you're absolutely right. It's a potentially dangerous thing. I mean, I always fall back on this, but I think it's true, and that this is one of the reasons why I believe in all methods, everybody attacking their own way. I think you need to have the absolute purists, whatever, that really hammer home the pure version of the message and whatever. Yeah. And I think you need to have all manner of people. Working towards that goal in all manner of ways. And I think there's a role for the purist, and I think there's a role for the pragmatist, and everybody in between. I'm not one of these people, like, I'm never going to sit here and say, Jeffrey Tucker needs to shut the fuck up about libertarianism, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'd like him to shut the fuck up, but, I'm not going to sit here and say that I know how libertarianism should be spread, and it's, part of that has to be Jeffrey Tucker shutting the fuck up.
I think Jeffrey Tucker's usually pretty cool. The only time that Jeffrey Tucker triggered me a little bit was when he was saying that potheads aren't too cool.
But I think he walked that back.
Yeah, probably because he's a leftist.
It's like I said, like a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, other than that, Tucker. I mean, I've always liked the guy. He's a very likable dude.
But
I mean, his tirade at Richard Spencer, where like he rolled up to him at some conference and was like, "You need to go. You are not welcome here." Blah blah blah. Meanwhile, like he had been invited by people at the conference. So
no, he hadn't.
I don't know. Maybe he was invited by some like alt-right writers who caught wind of it.
He was invited by some group that was like the Hoppian something society.
It seemed like he just wanted to call some waves.
No, I mean, he was invited and he was sitting there just talking to people. They were actually in the hotel restaurant or something, or cafe or something.
Well, I mean,
which was not like in the conference. This was just like the hotel cafe.
Yeah, but he did have a sign up that said
out.
Richard Spencer at IFSLC or whatever. Like he was trying to make it, and he's done this before. Like he's I'm sure
he was.
Which look, if that's what he wants to do,
but he wasn't the one making the scene. Jeffrey Tucker was the one making the scene. Maybe he was baiting him.
Yeah, I mean, would have liked to see it handled better.
No, well,
Jeffrey Tucker was a total ass.
Would I have liked to see it handled better? Yes.
Dude,
do I support him getting thrown out? Yes.
But wasn't there like
Jeffrey Tucker had no authority to throw him out?
Well, he didn't actually throw him out. He just got the people to throw him out.
Dude. First off, wasn't there like 30 minutes of fucking what's his name, Spencer, like fucking arguing with people before Jeffrey Tucker even walked in?
Well, yeah, he had been talking to people.
Yeah, I mean, from what I could see, there was like a big a big fucking ruckus because nobody likes this dude. And then
there were he was invited to be there, and there were people there that wanted to talk to him. He was just sitting in a booth. He wasn't going up to anybody. He was just sitting in a booth. And because he was invited to be there and talk to people. There were people that wanted to talk to him. There were other people that wanted to walk up and harass him and interrupt it and prevent him from speaking to the people that wanted to hear what he had to say. That's the simple fact of it.
I just don't see what this guy has to do with liberty. Like, why would you be at a liberty fucking conference?
You know that he's actually like introduced Ron Paul at speeches and stuff before? Did you know that?
No.
He was like a significant figure. I mean, well, relatively. Like, not totally insignificant figure in Ron Paul's 2008 campaign.
What? I have to look that up.
Look it up.
I'm looking it up.
Well, you can see him introducing Ron Paul at a speech.
Well, if the guy
used to be a libertarian.
Maybe he was, but now he's not.
You realize that
so it's like
virtually like a huge portion of the alt-right are ex-libertarians.
Sure, yeah, but that's the thing. They're ex-libertarians. They're not libertarians.
Correct.
So look, I mean, we can argue about the guy's views or whatever, but I mean, if you're just looking at it from the standpoint,
so
and Jeffrey
libertarians
Tucker
should never listen to anybody other than other libertarians. I mean, of course that's
not
ridiculous.
That's not what I'm suggesting, though. I never said that. What I'm saying is that when you have a guy show up and make it look like he's a part of the conference, and he is and people know him as like the white supremacist alt-right guy.
Did he know that it would be controversial? Sure. Does that mean he's not allowed to show up because people are going to be?
I'm not saying he's not allowed to show up, but I'm saying they're allowed to throw him out.
I mean, Jeffrey Tucker had no authority to do that.
I don't think that he literally picked him up and threw him out. I think he got people to throw him out.
Well, okay,
And it
but
wasn't the cops.
That's ridiculous and stupid and nonsensical.
I don't know. I mean, it's bad optics, man. I mean, it's like
they don't own. This is the thing. He wasn't in the conference. He was in the hotel restaurant. The people in the restaurant or his cafe or bar or whatever it was had to like yell at the people that were yelling at Richard Spencer, saying, "Hey, like this isn't your conference. This is a fucking restaurant. Keep it down."
Yeah, well.
So the people that are harassing Richard Spencer were, if anything, the actual true property owners, the actual restaurant themselves. The only person that had any problem with anybody that had any justification was the restaurant was pissed off at the people yelling at Richard Spencer. They had no problem with Richard Spencer.
Well, when people argue,
I mean, it's ridiculous to argue that anything other than the people that were harassing Richard Spencer were in the wrong. That's all they were doing. They were harassing somebody for having a different opinion. He was invited by people that were like attending the conference.
Well,
but they weren't.
And this wasn't conference property.
Like, wouldn't you say that Tucker was the biggest name at the conference?
I don't know. I don't know anything about the conference. It's a bunch of fucking nobodies.
I mean, he's one of the biggest names in libertarianism. So
among left libertarians,
I wouldn't see once again. Like, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that Tucker's a left libertarian.
Yeah, I don't see that at all.
And okay. I don't even know that you even have a firm definition of a left libertarian. I don't know that if we had a left libertarian, an actual left libertarian sitting next to you, I don't know if you guys would maybe agree on the definition.
His roommate is a left libertarian. I triggered the shit out of him.
No, he's not. Dude.
I don't think he is at all, dude.
See, he's not.
Dude,
okay, now you know who is though.
Dude, left libertarians not exist to you?
Alex is a left libertarian.
Like
left
Alexis?
libertarian.
Yeah,
like Alexis
Alex Miller.
Alex Miller.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, you've never been on with him.
I think
we should have you on with him though.
All right, I'll trigger the shit out of him.
No, I mean he's.
And there's your perfect example. You know that I'm diametrically opposed to him on all sorts of things. Like, yeah, you'll trigger the shit out of him because you know that there's a difference between left and right.
Well, I'm not saying that you'll trigger the shit out of him.
Well,
I'm just saying it would be fun to have.
My point is that you're acknowledging that there is such a spectrum among libertarianism that is called left and right, and that that you're acknowledging that such a thing exists.
Yeah,
I'm definitively on the right, which I have no problem with.
Yeah,
and there are others that are definitively on the left. I'm arguing that Tucker's on the left. You guys seem to be trying to argue that
I've never heard Tucker say that he was on the left. So when
he talks about social justice, that's like
I've never heard him definitively say that he was on the left. Just like I've heard you a million times claim to be on the right,
because he's trying to deceive people into believing leftism under the guise of libertarianism.
No, dude, come on. I mean.
Dude,
I mean, yes, you kind of got us in the trap of now we're kind of admitting that there's a left-right thing. I don't, because see, I don't put myself on it, so like I don't believe it exists for me.
I mean, Tom Woods acknowledges it. He's called out in very thinly veiled ways. He's called out Tucker for giving shit to Cantwell over libertarian brutalism.
Okay, but he never called him a lefty. I mean, he and Tucker are friends.
Not really. No, Woods has been. He's exceedingly diplomatic, but he was very thinly veiled when he pointed out that like Tucker was completely full of shit for going after Cantwell and going after libertarian brutalism and saying that, oh no, it's not enough to have principles and philosophy, you have to add social justice on top of it. That was the whole point of his argument against libertarian brutalism, was that it wasn't lefty enough, it didn't include social justice, and thus it was incomplete libertarianism.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There is thick and thin is left and right. That's exactly what I mean by it.
See, I just don't think of it as left and right. I think of it as, I mean, I would call myself a thin libertarian. Like,
well, okay,
there are certain things.
My argument is that the phenomenon of thick and thin libertarianism is the left-right phenomenon. That's my argument.
All right, so it's semantics essentially.
So I've done a very poor job of pointing that out. I should have pointed that out much sooner. That's what I mean. I'll take responsibility for that one.
Yeah,
but if that helps clarify,
that does.
I hope it does.
Okay, I mean, if that's truly what you're talking about, then yeah, I mean, like, there are certain things that I do care about in the world that I see as distinct from libertarianism, and like maybe some of them might be social justice causes according to you. I'm not sure. Well, I think we would probably agree on a lot of things.
What transcends into social justice when you start talking about it as political policy?
No, yeah, of course, and that's the thing. I don't believe in any sort of political policy for any of that shit. You know. But I would like to see. I
mean, I love saving puppies and kitties too.
Right,
I mean,
but that's sort of like where, like, when people start talking about all this shit with like, and on the so-called right side, like when people start talking about the the ethnic biodiversity and like, sort of like the borderline white supremacist shit. I'm just like, that has nothing to do with libertarianism. If you want to talk about an effective way to run society that might like be conducive to libertarianism, I would still disagree with you, but that's not libertarianism. Libertarianism is the non-aggression principle.
All those people reject libertarianism, so there's no conflict there.
What, the alt-right people?
Yeah, they do not consider themselves libertarian.
But there are some people that do.
Yeah, I mean,
there are some people like the people that were running like Liberty Hangout for a while, like that. I think his name like Jared Howe or whatever.
Yeah, I'm friends with him on Facebook. I'm aware of who he is.
I don't know a whole lot about him, so let me not completely shit on him. But like from what the articles I've seen him posted,
the stuff that I see him post, I love.
I don't know. Maybe
but no. So you're saying that's an example of the stuff that you reject, and you say that has nothing to do with.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Look, you can have your opinions on other things, but don't put it under the umbrella of libertarianism, because to me,
I'm not sure that he does though.
Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I'm.
Maybe. I mean, I think.
But there are people that do, and maybe I can't give a good example, so maybe I shouldn't really talk about it. But it's happening on both sides. It's happening with so-called left libertarians. It's happening so-called right. And I just say, stop all the bullshit. Like, libertarianism is very simple. It's like the most simplest philosophy in the fucking world.
It is, but I think there's room to have both. Your philosophy and your politics aren't necessarily one and the same thing. And it goes back to the idealism versus pragmatism.
Yeah, sure.
That came up earlier, and
but I would just say don't. All I'm saying is don't conflate the two. Don't conflate the two. Like,
sure, no, I think that's important, but I think generally from what I've seen, people are pretty are pretty careful not to do that. I mean, certainly the alt-right largely just reject and laugh at libertarianism,
sure,
because their focus is on what's actionable.
Yeah.
And what's tangible, and they have their own ideas about what's actionable and tangible. They think that libertarianism is completely ineffective, and they have some pretty good arguments to that end. Libertarianism has not been particularly effective, or at least not as effective as the rest of us would like it to be.
But I mean,
so I think there's room for, as long as you're cognizant of it and careful about it, because yes, the slippery slope is dangerous, but I think it's possible to have politics that are more different, or, there's nuances that can not necessarily line up with your philosophies, but as long as you understand, I'm going to jumble up my words, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, you can still maintain a philosophy and understand that, like, look, this is a step to achieve that philosophy that doesn't necessarily embody that philosophy, but it's an important way to get there.
Yeah, I just have a problem with something that is in like direct opposition to that. Like, if you're like...
Well, like what? I mean, I don't think that, like, enforcing borders is...
No, I mean, I don't necessarily think that. I mean, I disagree with it, but I don't necessarily... It's like... I don't think it's necessarily in contradiction 100%, aside from the fact that you're using the state. But then again, it's like, okay, then do I have to call out Ron Paul for using the state to his advantage? But the way that Ron Paul did it, I think, is more in line with libertarian principles than building a wall, which is just spreading the ideas through, without the use of force.
Perhaps.
I mean, we're talking about two different...
At the same time, Trump has a lot better chance of building the wall than Ron Paul ever did of actually stopping a bill. But that's not what Ron Paul was trying to do.
Right. No.
And that's fine, and that's great. I mean, believe me, I love Ron Paul. But again, he very carefully, of course, he never came out and said it, but that for all his time with Rothbard and the Mises Institute, that he understood anarcho-capitalism.
Oh yeah, of course.
But he
I'm sure
always
he was, yeah.
But he always, and I don't doubt that he, was philosophically an anarcho-capitalist. But he was also carefully to say that he politically was not an anarcho-capitalist. Bam, there you go. He had a separate politics from his philosophy. Assuming he was an ANCAP, which I think he was, at least on some level, and that some level being separate from his actual political level, where he's like, fuck it, like, I'm still going to maintain my philosophy as best I can, but I'm going to still act politically to go there and tell them all to go fuck themselves to their faces. Yeah. So I want to say it to their faces instead of to a whole bunch of, into the void that...
Yeah. I mean, so listening. I guess it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. Because, I mean, there's a spectrum of, like, how non-libertarian are your actions that are trying to further libertarianism. Well, that's why I'm like...
This is a huge thing. This is the huge... I think, really sort of the primary criticism from the alt-right of libertarianism is that it's just this incessant purity spiral. purity spiral, which is sort of the opposite of what you're talking about. Like, you're worried about, oh, it's a slippery slope. And yes, that's a concern, but there's still a concern on the other end of the spectrum, which is the purity spiral, which is what you get stuck into if you're the quote unquote autistic ANCAP, where it's like, oh no, this isn't like the most pure free market, voluntary, blah, 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 and thus it's evil and must be stopped. It's like, well, if it's, if you're talking about cutting the taxes in half, you're an idiot for saying, oh, but it's still being taxed, it's still slavery, and thus I have to oppose it. It's like, no, that's fucking retarded. It's like, if they're going to cut the tax, like, of course they still shouldn't be taxing you at any rate, but half is better than nothing.
Right. Well, it's like what me and Bergman talk about a lot on here, which is like the metaphor of the bus. Like, we're all on the Liberty bus, and usually we talk about in the context of there's some people that don't want to go full ANCAP. They want to get off at Minarchy Land. And it's like, all right, get on the fucking bus, let's go. We're all going in the same direction, and then when we get to Minarchy Land, then we can have that conversation. So in that sense, applying it to this situation, it's like, as long as, like, the people that are being like you're talking about, where it's like, oh, we can't even cut taxes in half because we just have to eliminate them all at once, and like we have to push the anarchy button today. That's sort of like, that's not the bus. The bus is let's move towards it, and let's be happy that the bus is moving forward and then it's not broken down. Because number one, like, that would just be disastrous if you had anarchy tomorrow.
Oh, well, yeah, probably.
Yeah. Because I'm of the belief that you have to have, like, in order for it to work, we're going to have the majority of people at least have a working understanding of the non-aggression principle.
I'd say you tireless minority.
Well, here's the thing, and this is why I make no apologies about identifying with the right. Now, obviously, we all know that libertarianism comes from liberalism. We all know what classical liberalism, and that's basically the foundation of our beliefs.
Yeah.
Really, the non-aggression principle is just a better, more objective, purer way of stating the essence of classical liberalism, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This whole notion of you shouldn't fuck with other people that aren't fucking with you goes back a lot further back than Murray Rothbard, obviously.
Of course.
This is why I identify with the right, because obviously, libertarians and Republicans, conservatives, whatever, have generations now at this point of vehement disagreeal on all sorts of policy decisions, but at the end of the day, the philosophy is pretty much the same. So again, it's the philosophy is different than the politics. Their politics, I think, a lot of a great example, war on drugs. I still think it's a stupid fucking policy, no matter how you cut it.
Right.
Even though I certainly have a much greater appreciation now for why people oppose it and think that it's a social ill and everything. I totally get that. But yeah, the war on drugs policy-wise, total failure. But at the end of the day, Republicans, at least, even if all they're doing is paying lip service to it and then politically they go and do other stuff, at least there's an understanding of the philosophy of classical liberalism, whereas leftism is not premised on that at all. So at least, I can have a much better conversation and a much more productive relationship with somebody that at least understands the fundamental premise, even if they end up arriving at a totally different answer or the wrong answer or whatever.
Yeah.
At least they're starting from the same perspective, and we can understand the perspective that each other is coming from, and we're starting from the same place. Whereas that's just simply not the case with somebody on the left.
I don't
explaining what I call the left-right paradigm. That's why I identify with the right, and I think that there is independent of the Nolan chart, there is still a left-right. And it's premised on the underlying philosophy, even if you disagree with the politics, i.e. the policy, which is sort of more the up-down, are you authoritarian or are you libertarian or whatever, versus left-right.
It's the dumbing down.
So I guess all I'm getting at is, let's not focus too much on the policy and the politics of, is it authoritarian or libertarian. I think it's every bit as important, if not more important, to also, again, look at that left-right philosophical foundation. Because again, I can talk with your Bill O'Reilly watching, Reagan voting Republican and have a much more productive conversation than I ever could with somebody that's just a dyed-in-the-wool leftist.
I don't know that.
It's from a completely different perspective.
As long as we're talking about white Americans, but if we're talking about, Muslims living out in Syria, they're going to sing a different tune. They're not going to care as much about their personal liberty.
What tune do you want them to sing?
I want to see them to sing the tune of "Let's stop starting fucking wars everywhere" and bombing the shit out of everybody.
And Trump has been roundly criticized for his actions in Syria, and I will be the first to, if Bergman wants to press me about what's the one thing.
Well, I was
going to never say anything bad about Trump. What's the one thing? Just say one bad thing about Trump.
I was going to say that's where I was going to get next, dude. The elephant in the room.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100% oppose it. I think it was complete bullshit. I have no idea why he did it. Maybe it'll somehow become apparent. I assume that it's got
40 chess move.
I assume that it's got him some sort of leverage that he wanted.
No idea. Come on. You don't think it's symbolism that this guy has been bought? Somebody who's spoken out against getting involved in Syria all along, back to 2013? You don't think that this is a
he
symbol that
hasn't
he's
actually
been bought?
toppled Assad or anything.
Well, dude, like striking Syria, that's one day after they oust Bannon, then they strike Syria.
Yeah, I
think he's making a statement. My understanding is that he ordered the strike while he was having lunch with the Chinese ambassador or something. Or I think it was actually the Chinese president, not just like an ambassador. He was having a meeting with them or a lunch or something. No, in fact, no. This is true because he went out and he made this statement about the cake that they were eating. He's like, "Oh, it's the most marvelous, wonderful chocolate cake you ever seen." And that's when I ordered the bombs. And of course, everybody went crazy. They're like, "Oh my god, this guy's a psycho." But the point being that like he's having like his first sit down meeting, having dinner or lunch or something with the Chinese president, who's ostensibly like one of the most other powerful people in the world other than him. And here he is just saying like, yeah, let's bomb the shit out of him.
Yeah, that's callous as fuck.
Well, maybe, but
dude,
look who he's dealing with. I mean, I'm just saying it's blatantly a power move. We can say that the president shouldn't be playing God with this and that, and you're probably right. And I don't agree with it. I think it was a stupid thing, but I assume that there are reasons for it that may ultimately be positive.
But I think I
still don't like it, and so I'm happy to criticize him for it.
Okay,
but
hold on.
Why would you assume that there are reasons for it that might be positive, dude?
Because it runs counter to everything that he's ever talked about, and I don't think he hasn't actually gone in there. He hasn't sent in ground troops. He's not talking about toppling Assad.
Yeah, but he actually hasn't ever been principled about anything. He doesn't have principles. Woods will admit this. Rockwell will admit this. Block will admit this. The man doesn't have fucking principles, dude.
Well, no, he does. I mean, he has an America First principle. He has nationalistic principles.
No sort of like philosophical principles.
Dude, I think he certainly understands constitutional principles. He understands free market principles.
I think you give him way too much credit. I think he does whatever the last advisor said into his left ear.
I think that's ridiculous. You don't make $10 billion by just doing whatever the last thing you heard was. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's. I mean,
look, it's one thing to be good at making billions of dollars, and it's another thing to be like handling all the different things that a president has to handle. Which I don't think anybody should handle.
Totally.
Sure. Well, no, Trump actually just made some comments, and of course the left is lambasting him about saying they're like, "Oh yeah, being president's like it's way harder than I even thought."
Right. But the whole
that's a perfectly
we
reasonable
thing to say. We kind of skipped over the whole
and
Bannon thing, but the fact that Bannon was really the only anti-interventionist in that cabinet. And then the day before they launched the attack, he stepped down, or not stepped down, but was like pushed out essentially.
Yeah, I think that was the National Security Council. I think it was. I mean, he's still an advisor.
He's still an advisor. What I'm saying is like there's someone else running the show, at least on the foreign policy front. And that's not to let Trump off the hook. And I'm not making apologies for Trump, obviously, but I'm just saying, like, I think if the fact that you think this was like some weird 4D chess move, like, I just I'm
not saying it is. I'm saying it could be. It'll depend on what happens next. It'll happen on what he does next. Maybe he doesn't really do much of anything else. He just sort of did that as a token to appease some people, and he didn't really actually like hurt or kill that many people or whatever. And so like he made it as minimal as he could.
I'll be the happiest
and
person.
And then he doesn't do anything else, and he doesn't fuck with Assad, and that's the end of it. And if
that is all the North Korea shit, like.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it. Again, I assume this has to do with China.
Yeah,
obviously it's intertwined with China. So again, I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't think it's fair to just assume that he has nefarious intentions or that he's going to fail.
That's giving him too much credit. I think he's just whatever.
I don't think it's reasonable to assume that it's completely stupid either. I mean, he's a.
I'm not saying he's stupid.
We'll see. But I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to be completely pessimistic or just assume the worst or that he's just a complete idiot about everything at this point. It's definitely a lot of wait and see, and absolutely the Syria thing is a wait and see.
Also,
what he did isn't the worst. It could get worse if it does. He'll deserve more criticism. If that's all he does, and it gets him a little bit of bargaining power to not have to fuck with Assad again, then maybe it'll be worth it. Again, you're right. He's not a man of solid principles, but he's the chief executive. That means doing shit. So that's what he's doing.
Did you hear about
We'll
him
see what
meeting with
happens.
Duterte? Or I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. I think it's Duterte.
I know
That's
exactly.
pretty
I know
fucked up.
exactly who that is. I'm not sure. Maybe I heard something.
So he's the guy who's just been like executing like drug users and drug dealers.
Well, I think it'd be more accurate to say that
there's
he's been looking the other way as drug
he's
dealers
been
have
encouraging
been
it.
executed.
He's been encouraging it. He's been offering money.
Yeah, no, you're right.
This guy's
Yeah.
a piece of shit,
Well,
and it's like very
yeah.
concerning that Trump's meeting with him. I'm not saying Trump's going to institute a policy of like
So
shoot.
what's the nature?
Jesus Christ, man!
Wow. What's the nature of the meetings? I
I'm
don't know
not
much
sure
about this.
I don't think much has come out about it. It was just apparently he met with them and he like didn't tell anybody, which I don't give a shit about that, but it just seemed very weird and very concerning for someone. Duterte. Someone corrected me.
Yeah, he's.
But it is concerning because Sessions isn't the most drug-friendly AG we've ever had.
That's true. I'm not concerned about Trump fucking with drug policy. He does.
Well,
he
I
does
think-
seem to have an understanding and respect for federalism. In fact, the
Well, he
vast
has a
majority
respect
of
for
what
money,
he's.
which is it's hard to fight against. Colorado, who's making hand over fist. From their taxation, which obviously taxation is theft.
Well,
But it's like,
yeah.
But like, it's like,
Yeah, no, I think the political will to oppose at least marijuana, if nothing else. Now, I will say heroin, particularly with the epidemics and everything going on, is certainly a different story. And so we'll see what happens with that. Heroin being illegal, I don't think is nearly as bad as weed being illegal.
if you want to put it on a spectrum, but
Don't get me wrong. The drug war as a policy is still retarded on every level. Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
But yeah, I think just across the board, the political will to oppose weed, I think, is drying up pretty quickly, and it's certainly not a coincidence that it is coinciding with all the tax revenues rolling in.
Yeah,
of course, politicians.
I did hear something that Sessions met with some official from Colorado, and kind of came out with, I guess, like a more rosy view of marijuana or policy.
Well, I know,
so that's somewhat promising, but
I know in the following weeks after Sessions was appointed or confirmed or whatever, there's all sorts of concern from the weed legalization community, whatever. And my understanding is that the Trump administration did issue a statement stating that they were explicitly going to continue following the something policy or like the something letter or whatever, which is basically an Obama era executive policy of not fucking with states, just respecting states' rights regarding marijuana. So the Trump administration has at least explicitly said they're not going to fuck with states regarding their marijuana policy.
Yeah, until it happens, I'm not going to be throwing them all under the bus or whatever. But at the same time, he has been saying some pretty outrageous shit about marijuana, which is concerning. So if it's just words,
Sessions?
Sessions,
Or-
yeah.
Is there something like a specific?
There was something
in particular?
recently. What was it? It's just
Didn't he say like everybody who smokes
like
pot
as bad
is
as-
a bad person?
he did say that. He said something like it's as bad as
Not-
heroin.
Not recently. I don't
He
think.
said something about it being as bad as heroin. Recently,
Well, that's retarded.
yeah, it's retarded. And look, if
But
it
dude,
never
he-
manifests in the
he's your boy on
policy,
the right, dude.
then I don't give a shit. I only give a shit that maybe someone would hear him and think he's telling the truth, but I don't think that's gonna happen either.
Maybe it's just to appease people that want to hear that, and at the end of the day, Trump's the boss. That's the other thing is that there's been several people in the cabinet, in the administration that have been dubious or questionable regarding their past positions, but largely they have come out and sort of clarified and explicitly stated that their new policy is that of Trump's, and that that includes again, the AG issuing this statement saying we're going to follow the policy of respecting states' rights over marijuana laws. At the end of the day, these people like Sessions seem to be doing what Trump says, which is sort of how it's supposed to work. Trump's the boss. Trump has never made an issue over we need to fight marijuana. That's never been a policy position of his, and everything they've said about it has been reasonably good. I think they're going to avoid it probably as much as they can.
I would like for them to just fucking legalize it. But.
Well, but to that extent, if the states are all on track to legalize it, and the federal government can have a policy of we're not going to fuck with the states if they don't want to be fucked with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then at the end of the day, they get to sort of just ignore it and not do anything about it, and they don't have to take the heat for legalizing weed, and still the policy is the same either way. It's a win-win. Okay.
It's funny, like, take the heat for legalizing weed.
It's stupid. But
it was proven a couple years ago, though, that majority of Americans already believe that marijuana should be treated like alcohol.
That's probably true. It's probably been that way for a while. It wasn't always that way.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's just in the past couple years, dude. And here's another thing because I want to take us back into the right and the left for a second. Because, dude, I fucking know righties who fucking love their drug war, dude. They love their drug war. And, like, I'll talk to them about it, and I'll just basically come at it with compassion, because it's like, you've got peaceful people in prison for possession of the wrong type of vegetation in their fucking pocket. And this costs money, and you're taking fathers away from babies and mothers and fucking, children. You're throwing them in fucking rape dungeons for this shit. And this is the majority of the people that are in prison are nonviolent drug criminals.
They're exacerbating all the causes.
And I mean, how is that
exactly?
How is that fucking conservative? But no, a lot of these fucking righties love that, dude, and they fucking love their wars. And you talk about it, and you're like, well, maybe this is why the terrorists hate us, because we're fucking drone bombing them over there, because they're fucking. You've got kids growing up seeing like their fucking family members being like slaughtered, by the hands of the U.S. government, and why wouldn't they fucking hate our government? We are the terrorists in this situation. Make no mistake about it. Get the fuck out of their country.
Yeah, nobody's right in those conflicts for the most part. But that absolutely includes the U.S. Yeah, the U.S. has had a terrible fucking policy, particularly in the Middle East, for forever.
Yeah, and when you look at like Republicans and Democrats, they always agree on war, dude. Mm-hmm. So you've got the quote right and the quote left of American politics, and that's the only thing that they agree on. So like, I think as a libertarian, to like really claim one or the other of those, it really just, it just confuses things, and it just kind of jumbles us in, and it just kind of like dilutes things down. I feel like they're both fucking, like, in the semantics of modern politics, they're both fucking tyrants.
Amen, brother.
In terms of the right. Well, yeah, but, and again, this is what comes back to, is that there is the left right politically, and there's the left right philosophically. Yes, politically, they're all a bunch of crooks and liars, and they're all colluding together against us to do all sorts of crazy, insane, evil shit like the drug war and foreign policy and everything else. That's absolutely true.
That's the point that Bergman's making, is that we have to be careful about what terms we're using. And it just seems weird to me to like start saying fair. Like you're right or left instead of saying I'm a libertarian, or even like libertarian's getting harder to say, because it's like drawing these people into the fold. It's like I prefer voluntarist in the most pure sense, although when I tell people, like, if people ask me where do I stand philosophically, I'll say libertarian, because like they can understand what that is. But voluntarism is like seems to be to me the most pure way to describe like
it's also a good way to get people to like ask you about it.
That is true.
So you can be like that annoying vegan.
Crossfitting vegan.
No, and we love vegans. That was just a joke.
Voluntarism is about CrossFit.
It's basically
about kettlebells.
I'm just saying, vegans like to always tell you that they're a vegan, and I'm sure libertarians. I like to say that I'm a libertarian
you
too.
Tell someone's a vegan.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
don't worry, they'll tell you. That's how you spread ideas, having conversations and shit. So I guess that's another good thing about using the word voluntarist to describe your leanings. If you're a libertarian. And then people, whoa, really? What's that? And you just say, you tell them, yeah, I believe things should be as voluntary as possible.
Right. It's sort of the same thing as like, you don't call yourself a capitalist, even though like you're an Inc. You know what I mean? Like you don't, because it's become, and obviously you'd probably blame this on the cultural Marxists, of course, and I would probably agree with you. But you can't use the word capitalism anymore without like people just thinking of what really is cronyism, or
they have like
or mercantilism, or whatever you want to call it.
They believe in a childish cartoon version,
right? So And on the other hand, I don't think we need to keep running away from terms.
Yeah.
But I think terms that describe things better, the best, will have the most longevity. Like, I don't see voluntarist turning into, like, capitalist.
I like the term market,
without a really hard
market
fight.
anarchism. I like
Market
the term market
anarchism,
anarchism.
yeah.
I dig that a lot.
That's cool, yeah.
Well, I mean, we can debate nomenclature all day long,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I think there is some room for it. I think libertarians torture it a bit much. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The left has been using, here I am using this term left and right, but the cultural Marxists have been using language as a tool, as a cudgel, for a long time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we see PC is a fantastic embodiment.
Even
of
though,
this.
ironically, they believe that language doesn't actually have any objective meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
At least the postmodernists.
They will make the objective statement. There is no such thing as objective truth. I mean, yeah. I mean, these people.
These people.
I'm losing my train of thought. But I mean, maybe I need to come up with a better word for it. But I do think there's still this underpinning philosophical. I think it is a character trait. Being left or right philosophically, and maybe and again, I'd say that independent of politics. I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
Not necessarily talking about authoritarianism
When you say
and
character trait,
libertarianism.
do you mean like genetic character trait, or you mean just in general?
A character trait, as much as anything else, is a character trait that is expressed in the nature of your character.
Okay.
And I don't mean strictly genetic, like the color of your eyes, although I'm sure genetics has a part to do with it. I mean, everything is some mixture of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
Nobody knows for sure what's the exact ratio, although there are some interesting studies using technology that's relatively new that point to some interesting ideas about nature versus nurture and potential influence these certain factors can have. But the point is, it's some mixture of the two, for sure, at some level. Whether it's 99% of one or 99% of the other or 50-50, I have no idea. But I think that there is an inherent character trait of this left versus right political philosophy, for lack of a better word. And again, if you look at, I'm not sure that what I'm talking about is a bit nebulous, and I'm not sure I'm talking about specifically, the R versus K reproduction strategy that is talked about a lot in conservative circles. I think it is somehow correlated with, or has something to do with, or uses similar mechanisms. Or maybe it really is just nothing more than the R and K reproduction strategies. But there is something, whether it's genetic or your environment, whatever, there's something inherent to a person's character, I think, that falls along, that can be placed along this left-right spectrum that is independent to some extent of politics. Even these, retarded conservative, quote-unquote, Republican drug warriors still, on some level, do actually understand classical liberalism. They do actually understand the Constitution. Now, they've been brainwashed into believing crazy, stupid shit that are clear violations and in contradiction to these philosophies of classical liberalism, constitutional republic, whatever. Mm-hmm. But they still do, on some level, really do understand and appreciate the value of classical liberalism and a constitutional republic. To a leftist Marxist, a constitutional republic is an impediment to what they see as virtue and what is good in the world, and you see that all the time and manifested in all sorts of different ways. But I mean, the cultural Marxists vehemently oppose, for example, First Amendment. Obviously, they don't believe in free speech. We've seen that in the Berkeley riots and all sorts of other leftist behavior. Yeah, over generations, really. But they've really put a fine point out with the Antifa riots and everything. These Antifa who are out there literally assaulting peaceful people. There's something fundamental inherent with them. Like, they're not just like, what? Let me back up. There's something fundamentally different about the thought process of a person that goes out there and does what Antifa does and thinks that they are the virtuous right person. That takes a very, very different kind of person and thought process to arrive at that conclusion, compared to somebody that maybe you think Base Stick Man is a jackass, maybe this or that or whatever. But, whether maybe libertarians think that Trump and Trump supporters are all dumb assholes, but you at least understand free speech and the premise of
Of course.
I don't care how much of an asshole this guy is. Maybe even you think that Richard Spencer should get punched. I think you do. Maybe even you think Nazis should get punched.
I don't think.
No.
But no, I'm not for punching. I'm not for
Okay.
punching. Okay, and I don't think all Trump supporters are dumb assholes.
But you certainly understand.
Any more than I don't think all Hillary supporters are all dumb assholes.
Not necessarily, but these Antifa.
Yes, they are all dumb assholes.
They're a special case of stupid. Okay,
But they're all the way on the opposite end of that spectrum. But my point is, that's a very different kind of person that does not think like you or I do. And I'm not trying to other them and say they're inhuman.
Yes. Well, no, they're not inhuman. Sort of play a devil's advocate, but not really.
But you see what I'm saying? That
I get what
there's
you're
no
saying.
way you could possibly compute. Like you can compute in your head.
Here's the thing, I can
where
compute.
a Republican thinks that
I'm gonna have to
the drug
pull
war is
hold
justified.
on. I can compute.
I'm gonna have to pull my Jew card here. Okay,
Hold on. I can imagine what maybe they're thinking, which is they're viewing, I guess, the right or the capitalists or whatever as evil.
But you
and
don't
so they adopt that whole thing that we talked about earlier, which is the ends justifies the means, which is I don't care. Like, no, you're right. They have a different idea than me. Like I say everyone should be able to say whatever they want, freedom of speech, until you start swinging your fists around while you're talking, and then you hit me.
Just the cuffs.
But all I'm saying is like, and I'm not even disagreeing with you, but I am saying like I kind of understand from just like a bird's eye view of what they're probably thinking, which is that here are some evil people, like there's a bunch of Hitlers running around, and we can't let them talk at all, because if we do, the hate's going to spread, and the Third Reich is going to pop up. So we have full authority to just be violent on these people. Obviously, they're 1,000% wrong, and they also don't have. At the same time, they are very anti-property. I mean, they make that very clear in their manifestos and their websites and stuff.
Yeah,
so
they're explicitly communists.
They're explicitly communist. They're opposed to pretty much everything we believe in. That's not to say that they're necessarily themselves like purposefully evil or anything like that. They believe that they're good. They may be mistaken in what they're doing. I don't think their goal is to necessarily like create a worse world. That just their vision of utopia is just completely incompatible with what we find to be true.
Yes, well, and that's an extremely important point, is that it is incompatible. I think that's something people have to accept. And again, this whole diversity is a strength. It's like, well, no, accepting communists into your classically liberal society does not work. They're incompatible, and so I think that's a very astute observation that a lot of people, for whatever reason, refuse to acknowledge or accept.
I would sort of argue against the idea that you couldn't have like a commune over here and then have Ancapistan over here, and they don't conflict with each other. But yes,
theoretically, sure.
Yeah.
It's never worked out that way in real life. But sure, theoretically, we're talking theoretically. But my point.
I'm not saying it would last. I'm just saying.
Well, exactly.
Dude, how can you not love this guy?
No, I'm saying.
But here's the thing: is that you can go and believe me, I get it too. They're like, oh well, but the proletariat needs to bowl. I understand what their supposed thought process is. My point is that you can only understand it in this abstract way. You don't viscerally understand. You don't empathize with them.
I don't empathize.
That's the difference.
I don't empathize.
You
I don't know what the word is.
You understand it in an abstract fashion. Like, I understand that, like, this is what your argument is, but at the end of the day, that's
and I
a
understand it
complete
because
bullshit
I used to have I would never have done what they do, but I was like a socialist at one point, so I understand the thought process of like, yes, the working people are being oppressed by the capitalist pigs, and all that shit, and it's if you don't know a lot,
but you still, were you not raised, and did you not even all your time as a socialist understand that you don't hit somebody that hasn't hit you first?
Of course, yeah, of course. But the thing is, I never made the connection of like, in order to redistribute the wealth, you then have to go in and hit the other person. And once I made that connection, that led me down the road,
Yes, because you had the inherent character trait of not being some crazy lefty Marxist. Of course, you heard some stuff and you were young and you were like, yeah, that sounds about right. So, okay, I guess I believe it. But you still fundamentally had Western classically liberal beliefs,
Of course,
among
yeah.
which is fundamentally, it was never stated as such until recently, but the non-aggression principle. You don't assault people unless it's, there's self-defense, but otherwise you don't get to just assault people. And
Exactly.
I go back to that because it's a very simple, obvious one, and it's one we keep seeing violated by the Antifa, so it's a great example for us here.
No, yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that, maybe politically, you got had some bad ideas put in your head and you believed them, and okay, whatever. But ultimately, as you matured, as you grew up, that foundation of Western classical liberalism eventually came through, and you eventually realized, well, based on the foundation of classical liberalism, libertarianism as a political philosophy is the only logical conclusion. And here we are doing a libertarian podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
But there's something very different about these people who, it's not like they were never told, like, you don't hit people. It's not like they had never heard of any of this, like, Western philosophy, this American classical liberalism, like, all this stuff. It's not like they never heard any of this before, the same as everybody else did. But you eventually came around to a philosophy that, again, I call right, but basically classical liberalism, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And these people have gone radically the other direction. They're in a position where they're making justification for doing the exact opposite of everything that classical liberal philosophy prescribes in a completely 100% incompatible fashion. And that's what I'm talking about, is that, people get tripped up on policy. Even a lot of, maybe not all, but a lot of these pro-drug war right-wingers just don't know any better. They got brainwashed into a stupid policy idea. But at the end of the day, you can at least talk to them. And then when you bring up the idea of constitutional republic or classical liberalism, property rights, whatever, at least those are concepts they understand and respect and will engage with.
They don't understand classical liberalism.
Whatever.
They don't. I'm just saying.
My point is that on a fundamental character level, there are people that get it and people that don't, for whatever reason, whether it's genetic or nurture. I don't know. I don't claim to know, but there are people that get it and people that don't, and it's a character trait. And I don't think it serves us well to just completely ignore that. But it's certainly not a black and white thing, but there really is something inherent to people's character.
Here's what I would say, though. I would say that while what you're saying might be true, I do think that most people. And let's accept that what you're saying is true. I do think most people do have the good inherent trait that you're talking about. But the problem is they don't make the connection. They don't make the connection.
I never said anything was good. I'm not.
Well, all right.
I am trying to be careful of not saying that I'm right, they're wrong, or whatever. I am trying to say they're incompatible.
Okay, but by virtue of you believing or being a libertarian, you obviously believe it's right.
Yes. Yes. Sure.
So that's what I'm saying. Okay. So, liberty, I think most people have or were taught the innate idea, or not the innate, but I'm contradicting myself with those two terms. But most people were taught, and I think there is a natural component to it, or a hereditable component to it, but I think most people do subscribe to the non-aggression principle. However, they make, and Stefan Molyneux in his good days talked about this, where where he talked about how it's just people, when it comes to their personal lives, most people abide by the non-aggression principle. The majority of people, at least in this country, abide by the non-aggression principle. You don't walk up and punch somebody. You don't. When you talk to people, you negotiate.
Some people do.
Some people do, but I'm saying
minority.
most. I'm saying most people.
Absolutely.
But the problem is, when we move to the public sector, there's like a wall comes up. Like that whole idea just vanishes, and there's just new magical rules that take hold, and people don't make the connection of like, okay, if someone comes to my door with a gun and demands money from me and says they're going to buy things for me, if I told you that in those terms, like you'd be like, well, that's fucked up. That's obviously stealing from me. I don't care if you buy me a bracelet or whatever, or a fucking car. Like, I didn't want to buy the car. But when you say, oh, but see, this is what the government does with the IRS, like, oh, well, that's different. That's taxation. So part of it is like, I do think, I'm not cynical about, like, you might be right that there are people who just inherently are not going to get it, or are opposed to it. But I think most people, and even like the drug warrior people, like you were saying, on some level they do understand that that's how you should behave. But when it comes to the public sector, their fucking mind goes bonkers, you know?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, again, we're all ANCAPs or something like that here. I mean, we get it. Like, they're called rules and principles because they're inviolable,
Right.
Otherwise, it's not a principle. So obviously, we have these principles and we apply them consistently. Thus, ANCAP. you know, it's very simple. And I totally get that. Oh, fuck, what was the point? But still, there are, minarchists, again, minarchists that support the drug war, that are ostensibly minarchists, and obviously, to us, supporting the drug war isn't very minarchist of you, but at least there's some sort of lip service, if nothing else, to the concept of limited government. So the point being, we agree that government should be as small as possible. We just differ on how small that should be. Yeah, obviously we think that that it can be zero, and they just think that, oh well, you still have to have police and courts and blah or whatever, and bombs and Moabs over Afghanistan. I mean, believe me, I don't disagree. They're totally inconsistent. I get that. But they're still minarchists, and they still understand and respect the concept of that. But if it could be smaller, there is inherent value to a smaller government for the sake of being smaller.
Right.
Because there's all sorts of things that are benefits to that, like increased voluntarism. I mean, I think a lot of them understand that an increase in state power is a reduction in voluntary, agency. They just conclude that it's a worthwhile trade-off. Yeah. We disagree with them, but at least they consider. At least we're on the Liberty bus. But at least they're making the consideration that big government is not necessarily good. In fact, big government is inherently bad, so it better be doing something really good in order for it to be growing. Now, of course, we know there's no such thing it can do that's good enough to justify it, but again, at least there's that consideration there, and so I can have a much more productive conversation with a minarchist than I can with a communist.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So, if I should be more careful about what I mean by left and right, I suppose, but I can't really come up with a better term, or way of looking at this spectrum. But I think it's a real spectrum, and it really exists, and it is something that we shouldn't ignore. Like these Antifa people, like, really are our enemies. They're really never going to get it,
dude. I think it really exists in your mind.
Are we going to get into like some solipsistic Boltzmann brain in a jar? Crazy shit. We're all a simulation.
Maybe we are, dude.
Yeah, we probably are. We keep getting so off track. I think we've covered a lot of this stuff. We haven't talked about the Pope. That was supposed to be like number one. Have we talked about the Pope?
We haven't talked about the Pope. We did move it down to number 2, though. So I see that arrow. Boom.
Oh.
Yeah. So the Pope. Let me pull up this article, but here we go. So the Pope had some things to say recently, and here are some of them. I cannot fail to speak of the grave risks associated with the invasion of the positions of libertarian individualism at high strata of culture and in school and university education, the Pope said in a message sent to members of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences meeting in the Vatican. A common characteristic of this fallacious paradigm is that it minimizes the common good. That is the idea of living well or the good life in the communitarian framework.
What?
So that was just a fucking word sandwich there. Fucking word salad.
That was complete nonsense.
Yeah. So, actually, we were talking about Tucker earlier. And the thing I don't like about, Tucker and Woods is when they... talk about religious shit, just because.
Is Tucker explicitly a Christian?
He's Catholic.
Oh, a Catholic. Okay.
So he kind of tried to defend the Pope on this, but not explicitly. Like, he basically said the Pope isn't talking about libertarianism. He's talking about...
Didn't he say libertarianism, like, explicitly?
Yeah, he did. So he was just like... he was saying he has a misunderstanding of libertarianism.
Well, no,
which maybe
shit.
He does, but yeah.
No,
clearly he does,
well,
right? Or maybe conceptually he does too, as well.
What he's saying is a complete misunderstanding of libertarianism.
Yes.
That assumes that he believes what he's saying.
Sure, yeah. Well, anyways, but yeah, it's obviously this is silly.
I mean, what a bunch of horseshit. I mean, that's not something the Catholic Church ever would have said 100 years ago, 200 years ago.
Yeah. But we've got this new, SJW Pope in office, right?
I mean,
didn't he say abortion was okay or something?
Did he? Oh, Jesus Christ!
Something ridiculous.
Yeah, well,
Which it's ridiculous for a pope to be saying it. Aside from the argument, I'm just saying it's ridiculous for the pope to say that.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is, I mean, I'm a total atheist. I don't know anything about Catholicism really, but
yeah, but you know enough to know that they're opposed to abortion, right?
well, yeah, obviously. So I mean, all I'll say is that this really seems to be just adding more fuel to the fire to the people that view him as an interloper and a what's the word I'm looking for?
I'm not sure.
Wait,
you're talking about the Pope?
Yeah, that he's
intercourser with
interlocutor.
Yeah, with candle boys, or what are they called?
Candle boys.
What are they called?
What are they called? The
altar boys.
Altar boys.
Yeah.
Candle boys.
Candle Boys.
Yeah,
that sounds like a 90s band, Candle Boys.
Yeah, it just sounds. He just seems to be like way more political than like any other pope that we've seen.
Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people that say like, oh, he's just a fucking, Marxist interloper. He should never have been the pope. It's just, fucking invasion of Marxism into the Catholic Church. And, I don't know. I don't know enough about Catholicism to say one way or the other. But this is only fueling the fire of the people that are critical of the pope for all those reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just communist horse shit. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's the
current year.
It's the current year, man. What are we doing? All right.
So what else do we have on here?
You want to talk about the Oxford College thing?
Oh, yeah. So this is just sort of like a fun little trivia thing.
Little trivia thing.
Well, not a trivia thing. It's just a funny little anecdotal thing of just leftists eating themselves, and it tickles me to read about this kind of shit. Let me see if I can pull it up. What did I do? So basically, Oxford College put out some sort of statement or study or something stating that it was a racial microaggression to not make eye contact with people. And so again, I don't know. I guess that it's only if you're white, and it's only if you're not making eye contact with brown people. I assume. I don't really know what they're getting at. But what
if I don't want them to steal my soul?
I mean, that would be a great reason to not be making eye contact, in my opinion. I mean, there's nothing racist about that.
No, man, I'm just looking out for my soul. I don't believe in.
Oh, I wish I could pull it up for some actual quotes, but the gist of it is that basically they were excoriated for being ableist because they were not being considerate towards people with autism. And blindness of various degrees, who are obviously not capable of making eye contact the same way that people that do not suffer from those disabilities can. Of course, autism, one of the big problems is the social thing, making and holding eye contact. So it was very insensitive of Oxford College to say that it was a racial microaggression because you could be autistic and or blind, in which case you would not be racist.
So wait, you can't be blind and racist?
Or autistic and racist, apparently, which I'm sure that the 4chan and 8chan people will be very interested. Paul will be very excited to find out that their weaponized autism protects them from accusations of racism. So Oxford then had to issue a statement very regrettably, apologizing for very regrettably issuing their previous statement in too much haste and not taking into consideration all these other factors. So that was just sort of your daily leftists eating themselves hilarity. So I thought that was just a juicy morsel.
How do you even come to the conclusion that people aren't making eye contact enough?
I mean,
do people were people just going up to black people and just having their eyes completely averted as they talk to them?
Well, the problem is that there's not enough real racism in the world to give them the political power they want, and so obviously we just need to invent shit. So, makes sense.
All right. So did you guys hear about Milo?
I've heard very little. I actually the most I've heard about it was actually some statement that Richard Spencer put out, and so obviously he's not universally critical of Milo, but he's very critical of Milo. He doesn't like Milo for all sorts of reasons. Not surprising. But yeah, that's the first I'd heard that he has $12 million in backing to start some new venture which it isn't clear to me what it is. I don't know if you can elaborate. It has something to do with touring, which was sort of what he was known for and what he had been doing.
Apparently it's going to be like the conservative version of Live Nation, whatever that means. Like,
well, I mean, Live Nation
apparently is a touring ticketing. All that shit.
But they do like concerts, like
so
music and bands, not political speeches.
Right. Well, so I think from what I read, he wants to get like conservative and libertarian, comedians and I guess bands and any sort of entertainment that has like a, I guess what you would call a right flavor.
So we could like start a band and get signed by Milo.
That'd be cool.
Dude, I need to look into this.
I'm just wondering if he can really bounce back from the controversy.
I mean that's what it comes down to. My understanding is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like the branding is like the company's called Milo or something.
Oh yeah.
So he's definitely not backing away from
his brand.
Yeah, his branding. Which seems pretty risky. I mean, I don't know how it's all going to play out. I mean, I've seen all sorts of insane shit just sort of vanish down the memory hole, and like people just stop talking about it. It's like, wait, you realize like this person like served time for murder like decades ago, and they're like, but the thing they're a college professor now, so whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like
what?
And while what he said and what he condoned or didn't condone was certainly controversial, he didn't actually like commit pedophilia. Yeah, you know what I mean? Not to like defend him on the other charges, but I'm just saying from the point of like bouncing back from something. Like, it's one thing if he fucking was a child molester and he bounced back from that. That would be a little bit more telling of our society's ability to forgive people. But if he just kind of bounces back from this, I wouldn't be as surprised. But of course, obviously, the left is going to carry it as a fucking blunt object for eternity. So he's gonna have to overcome that. It's gonna be convincing the people on the right that abandon him that it's all good now.
Yeah, and that may be a lot trickier. I mean, obviously, it's always the leftists that get away with all sorts of sexual crimes, that vanish down the memory hole, like Bill Clinton, and countless others, really. Whereas anybody that's vaguely on the right, gets completely pilloried, and they never forgive you for anything you've ever done.
True.
So, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. I don't think what he said, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad.
Yeah,
again, he wasn't advocating anything. He wasn't admitting to doing anything. Really, I think the worst thing that he said was talking about witnessing what sounded like legitimate sexual abuse of some sort of minors at some like Hollywood party or something. Like, I think it was like a clip from a Joe Rogan show where he says like, oh, well, I was at like this Hollywood party and there was all sorts of drugs and other things going around. Like, it was very debaucherous. And there were some very young boys around, and I mean very young.
Yeah,
and like that's kind of like all he really said about it. But I mean, what it sounds like he's, it's pretty thinly veiled, like illegal activity of some sort. Now, again, are we talking about giving some ecstasy to a 17-year-old boy, or are we talking about like taking a 12-year-old boy into a bedroom against his will? I mean, there are matters of degree. It's all highly inappropriate. Yeah. But what he it sounds like he was describing at this like party or whatever, and the point of this story of him talking about it was that it was very debaucherous, naughty, bad stuff.
Yeah.
So he wasn't really condoning it. I mean, he was describing it in pretty negative ways, but he never said anything. But he didn't go to any authorities or anything. So, I think that really, and that is worthy of criticism to some degree. I think that he did, saw what is supposedly some really nasty.
I mean, assuming
shit.
that what he said wasn't just him being the Joker, him being the hyperbolic character that he is. Because that's the thing, you never know if what he's saying is true or if it's just the character of Milo just saying a bunch of crazy shit. Yeah. Obviously, in this case, there is a pattern of him talking about at least his own experiences and being fairly consistent in the telling of them. So,
well, no, and I mean, the thing is, I mean, what Milo said and what he's talked about, there's nothing remotely controversial about anything that he said or has said or anything within the gay community. As far as there being young boys that are maybe not illegally young, but like, let's say the age of consent is 15. Well, now you're talking about like 15-year-olds going to clubs with like middle-aged men. Like, if this was a straight relationship, we would never think that was totally appropriate. Now, again, like, I'm not saying like we should make this illegal, but like, this is eyebrow raising behavior for even people that are not particularly puritanical.
Yeah.
But that's really just that a lot of that stuff really does go on in the gay community, and that's just, it's known, it's understood.
Yeah.
So what Milo was saying was not controversial from his perspective at all. That's why he said it.
Right.
I mean, he's a master of controversy. I mean, he knows where lines are and how to tiptoe around them whenever.
Yeah.
He fucked up this time,
yeah.
but that's because from his perspective as a gay man and from gay culture, there's nothing particularly, bad about it.
Also, wasn't he abused?
He was molested by, I mean, he's open, and this is one of the criticisms that he gets, is that he's not as upset about the priest that quote-unquote raped him. Now,
Milo's damaged goods,
supposedly it was voluntary when he was a teenager. This wasn't like he was like an 8-year-old. This was like he was like 16 voluntarily getting with this guy.
But dude, he's damaged goods, dude. And then there's all this like Milo slut shaming, dude, that's going on.
Well, that's
slut shaming.
Well, I mean that is kind of what it comes. I mean, that is kind of what it is. I mean, yeah, I don't know how it's going to play out, and I think what's going to be important to how it plays out is exactly what you said, which is that he needs to vindicate himself to the right.
Yeah.
And how that's going to play out, I really have no idea. I'm not sure this is the kind of stuff that could vanish down the memory hole. That said, I don't think what he said was really that bad.
Yeah.
Wasn't good, but in the grand scheme of things, like, there's a lot worse shit like going on, than him like not being as upset as he should be about the sexual abuse he suffered as a child. Making a joke, the gallows humor, quote unquote, about it. Like maybe that's inappropriate, but like of all things, like he is a victim of abuse. Like
right.
There ought to be some wiggle room for him. He ought to be able to vindicate himself, I think. But I guess we'll see. Somebody obviously thinks that it's possible to the tune of $12 million.
Yeah,
the business idea itself sounds questionable to me. The Milo identity aside.
I mean,
but I don't know. I mean, all the genius ideas seem crazy before they actually worked and made people filthy rich. So, what do I know?
Yeah, what do you know? I'm just kidding.
I don't know shit.
No, I guess we can hit this last one. So did you guys hear about that Fyre festival?
How could you not?
How could you not?
All the Instagram and everything. I don't even have Instagram, and I've seen countless Instagram photos of this refugee camp.
Yeah, to basically sum it up, Ja Rule and like a bunch of
dude, it's like that's the best part about the story, dude. By far. It's Ja Rule.
You gotta feel bad for Ja Rule, man.
He doesn't even really have like all we know is that he's somehow associated with it. We don't even know that he had like what capacity he served.
I think he was the organizer.
I don't think so. I think like he just sort of like threw some money at it and like attached his name to it in the hopes it would do well. I have no idea, but that's the beauty of it. So anyway, I have no idea what Ja Rule has to do with the story. We just know that he has something to do with the story, and that makes it amazing because it's fucking Ja Rule.
Fucking Ja Rule, man. Yeah, so Ja Rule and a bunch of celebrity endorsements, like I guess Kendall Jenner was a part of it, and
I heard that.
A bunch of supermodels, and so anyways, they put together this like basically like elite festival in the Bahamas, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the Bahamas, that tickets cost like several $1,000s. I think it was like $10,000 for a ticket.
What I saw is that it ranged from $1,000 to $12,000.
$12,000,
something like that.
Yeah.
And I think part of that depended, like, there were supposed to be there were supposed to be like fancy villas that you stayed in, which apparently never actually existed.
Yeah. So basically, everyone showed up, or not everyone showed up, because some people's flights didn't take off.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they showed up, there wasn't enough accommodation, so people were basically like living in like refugee tents and getting like cheese sandwiches.
Yeah, no, people were like Instagramming pictures of like their lunch was like a very pathetic, like in a styrofoam like flip to go container
with like a small little sandwich in there.
Yeah, it'd be like a salad of like a piece of lettuce and a tomato and like the most pathetic sandwich you've ever seen. And it's like, wow, like even for just like a shitty street festival, I'd be upset with this. Like in the middle of Baltimore City Street Festival, I'd be like, this is bullshit.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, so it's kind of funny. It's interesting to see like the people that are like just hating on him because they're just like rich people. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like you get that like Schadenfreude, like, oh yeah, these like elitist kids, that can, just throw $12,000 at a music festival and ha ha ha.
Yeah, that's what I keep seeing. Like the context is that like people think that it's funny. The Schadenfreude of like, oh, it's just a bunch of spoiled bratty kids who are spending way too much money on some stupid vapid pop music and models and dumb shit.
Don't get me wrong, it's true to an extent.
It is, but I still think the best part of the story is Ja Rule.
Yeah, the fact that when was the last time you heard the name Ja Rule? You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. That's it. It just makes it so tasty. It's like Ja Rule just completely disappeared. Like nobody had thought about him in at least
he's
like
probably
8
thinking
years.
like, oh, dude, this is my way back, dude. I throw this fucking banging festival. Everyone has an awesome time. Everyone gets laid.
Yeah,
and then like I'm back on top, and then it's like the exact opposite happens. You literally throw like probably the worst festival in history.
So apparently, I know very little about what I saw. So apparently, Fyre, Fyre, the name of the festival, is some sort of they existed prior as an organization prior to the festival, and it was some sort of talent agency with an app. I have no idea what the function of the app was or something, but they're ostensibly some sort of talent agency. And if you go to their website, like one of the big talents are on the homepage is Ja Rule, of course.
So we're like these kids also trying to get modeling gigs and shit.
No, I don't think so. Well, where I was going with this is that I think the owner or CEO, president, whoever operates this Fyre agency / app thing is some 25-year-old kid.
What?
So my understanding is that it was basically a 25-year-old kid and Ja Rule. As far as I can tell, are the only two people that are visibly responsible for this festival in any capacity.
Oh my god.
So, and again, that's something else happened. Again, people are all focused on like,
man,
they'll look at all these people.
Who says a 25-year-old kid? Dude, the kid that put on Woodstock was like 20 or something like that.
Well,
and I mean, Woodstock was kind of a disaster too. But
well, yeah, it was actually. That was like the whole thing about Woodstock. Was that was a
we don't
total
remember it
fuck up.
as that, though. We remember it as like this awesome music festival.
Yeah, because communist revisionist history. But
dude, I would have gone.
Well, there was some good music.
There's some fucking awesome bands there, dude.
I'll give them that. I mean, look. I mean, I still think Rage Against the Machine's first 2 albums are phenomenal.
Of course,
I still love those albums. I fucking hate them. I want to chuck them out of a helicopter. But those 2 albums are great fucking albums.
Dude, this shit's so fucking weak, dude.
What? Chucking people out of helicopters?
No, I don't know. See,
or just
Rage. I mean, okay, like first 2 albums.
Shit on Rage?
I was careful to say the first 2 albums. I think they went
Evil
downhill.
Empire.
No, I think that was the best of the Rage stuff.
Wait, the first 2 was Evil Empire and Self-Titled.
Yeah,
exactly. The first one was the
Self-Titled,
eponymous,
then Evil Empire,
was the
second one.
You didn't like Battle for Los Angeles?
I mean, those are the only 2 I owned. They're the only 2 I cared to own. Every single I heard after that I thought was garbage.
Yeah, I thought it wasn't as cool.
What was on Battle of Los Angeles? Was that with Renegade? Was that on that?
Yeah, I think, or Renegades of Funk. I think it was called. I thought that was a terrible song.
I mean, both of those albums.
There was one song I've liked since then. I think Pistol Grip Pump. I think it's a later song. I'm not sure what album it's off of. It might have been the Battle for Los Angeles or whatever.
But yeah, the first 2 are awesome.
They are.
Agreed.
But yeah, it's like Know Your Enemy.
I didn't think the first 2 were awesome.
Yeah, no one cares, dude.
I don't know. I couldn't get through the entirety of the albums. I thought they were yawners. I thought they were a little huff.
What the fuck does huff?
You're just making shit up. You're just making shit up.
What?
You're just
How could you not
shit.
just want to like start fucking throwing bows, dude?
Seriously,
dude,
I mean, even like know your enemy. Even an ANCAP can totally appreciate Know Your Enemy.
Yeah,
Know Your Enemy
a
is
lot
like
of those songs
perfect.
like aren't necessarily like heavy socialist. Some of them are.
Oh yeah, a lot of them, but a lot of it is just, especially with the earlier stuff, is strictly just anti-establishment, anti-state.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's because it wasn't a communist state.
I mean, like, dude, I fucking had both those albums on tape when they came out, and
well, that was the problem. You had them on tape. Tape is an inferior medium. If you had them on CD,
it's true, bro.
Yeah, because then you could skip through shit. But I'm into fucking albums that I can listen to all the way through. So yes, I would agree. You would need a CD for that album so you could like skip through it.
Those were definitely albums that I would put the album on.
Weigh in, commenter, viewers, all 10 of you. Way in.
Yeah, I mean there might have been like 1 or 2 songs that maybe I would skip on occasion, but no, those were albums. I enjoyed them.
Those were fucking albums, bro. Those were fucking albums.
I mean, to me, I mean, if the sound of rage, like that's the perfect
Tom
perfect
Morello.
sound. It's the perfect sound. I mean, all of
dude,
them.
just what he was doing.
I mean,
with that guitar,
the
man.
bass tone. I have to say again, as a bassist, as a musician, I mean, I absolutely fell in love with the bass tone on those records, which was just Defender Jazz screaming through an SVT rig. But it definitely made an impact on me.
Yeah, but dude, bass
I
tone.
mean, all of the sound of the record, top to bottom, everything about it was definitely influential on me.
Dude, bass tone is not even important though. It's just like filling out the little end, dude.
Whoa,
That's because you play punk music, which isn't even music.
Hey, dude. hey, dude.
He
question.
says on punk rock.
I say on a podcast named for punk music.
Dude, question. How do you know the bass is too loud?
He's playing.
No, you can hear it.
That's
fair. No, my favorite musician joke of all time, which is a bassist joke, and that's mostly coincidental. How many bass players does it take to screw in a light bulb?
I think I've heard this before.
How many?
Good.
None. The keyboard player does it with his left hand.
Nice.
Maybe
I get it, Matt.
Maybe
He
real
plays the
music. Maybe if you're a
He
real
plays the
musician,
bass line with his left
maybe
hand.
if you're a real musician, you get
Okay,
it.
gotcha.
That's a good one.
That's a
Fuck
deep one,
you.
dude.
Yeah.
It's got layers to it.
Layers.
Just like whatever we were talking about before. I forgot. You said something about layers. All right. I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's it for tonight. Until next time, live free
Or die.
Statism's footprint is the blood that is shed, drenching the flags of the tax bombs in red. Poisoned by a few at the expense of the many, sold to the gods and the death machine. You can't justify killing by economic gain. For God, country, and democracy, you get the freedom and gunpoint in a foreign land. You support the troops, then bring them home. I believe that you will do the best for you. And I believe that we have the power, have the power. I hate the state, and I know I'm a slave. We can make the break the power, break the power. Society owes individuals nothing more than non-interference with natural rights. Once a virtuous person fully comprehends the non-aggression principle, the violence of the state becomes obsolete.